Masechet Shekalim, Daf Dalid. We're going to be speaking about who pays the half shekel and also the surcharge, which we'll learn about. We're going to talk about minors, Samaritans, very interesting discussion there, and opinion of Rabbi Meir, and then partnerships and corporations, also very interesting and could be practical in applying Talmudic law to modern corporations. All right, we begin with the Mishnah. אף על פי שאמרו אין ממשכנים נשים ועבדים מוקטנים, אבל אם שקלו מקבלים מידן. Although we already established that we do not take the collateral from women, slaves, and children because they don't have to give in the first place, so we certainly wouldn't take collateral. Nevertheless, if they want to give a machasita shekel, they can. We can accept it from them. The Gemara is going to ask about this phrase. On the one hand, from the fact that it says you don't take collateral, it sounds like, but you would collect. But then the second statement says, if they want to collect, they can, which sounds like we don't collect. So it looks like there's a slight contradiction here. We'll solve it pretty easily. But in any case, this is different from Hanochri v'Kotisha Shaklu and Mekabelin Mahen. You might think, oh, we accept donations from everyone. But no, a non-Jew, a Kuti, meaning a Samaritan, if they want to give Machasita Shekel, we do not accept it from them. Samaritans are very important here. If you remember learning Sefer Ezra and Nehemiah, they report that in 520, when actually before 539, when Cyrus the Great told the Jews they can go back to the land of Israel and they can rebuild their temple, they tried to rebuild the Bet HaMikdash, but the Samaritans were there. Samaritans believe that the holiest place in Israel is in the north, not in Yerushalayim, or rather in Shechem. And therefore, the Samaritans came and said, wait, we want to come help out and build the Bet HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. But they weren't sincere. They were gonna give money and help out, but then somehow undermine their efforts. And so the leaders then said, no, we don't accept your help. And so that's the background of the Samaritans. Okay, anyway, so that's for forevermore. If they try to give machasita shekel for the general upkeep and for the communal sacrifices, do not accept them, not from non-Jews either. We also do not accept from Samaritans or non-Jews the birds that one would bring if someone was zav or zava, an abnormal emission for a man and a woman, or someone who gave birth. To a woman who gave birth has to bring special sacrifices, or other sin offerings and guilt offerings. All these we would not accept. Now, it's kind of obvious we wouldn't accept them from a non-Jew because these categories don't apply to non-Jews. That's a zava. But it would make more sense for a kutim. You see, the Samaritans, they follow the Torah law, right? They believe in the five books of Moses, and whatever laws they follow very strictly. So they would have a concept of zav and zava, just different from that of the rabbis. Would they ever want to come to the Bet HaMikdash when they believe that it's wrong? Well, not likely, but it's possible there were times in history when there was no Bet HaMikdash in the north that was actually destroyed by the Hashmonaim. And so maybe as second best, they would at least bring something to the Bet HaMikdash. In any case, we do not accept any of these sacrifices. Zeh kilal, kol shenidar v'nidav mekabelin miyadan. That doesn't mean we don't accept anything from non-Jews, anything that is a free will offering, anything that one would vow and give. If we were a Jew and said, you know what, I want to give a korban todah, korban shelamim, or korban olah, and you can give that as a voluntary offering. If a non-Jew comes and gives that type of offering, or a Samaritan, it's acceptable. However, anything that is not given freely, like a chatat, which you have to bring if you did a sin, or a communal offering like korban tamid, those we do not accept, and therefore they cannot contribute to machasita shekel either, because that goes to communal offerings that are obligatory. And so too, Ezra says, right, that story that I just told you, says it is not, you are not to join us in building the Bet HaMikdash, right? Thanks, but no thanks. We do not trust your motives. The Mishnah continues. So kalbon is an extra surcharge It's that comes from the Greek word, which means a small coin that would be used as payment for the money changers. Okay, we're going to see it's about a 24th, a 12th or a 24th of a machasita shekel. And there's various reasons why you would have to give the surcharge. One is to pay the money changer. It's kind of a tip for his services, which makes sense. That might be the original reason. Another reason is because sometimes coins were debased. People would scratch off a little bit of silver or metal, and that's why there are ridges around the quarter, so people won't do that. So you might give a machasita shekel, but maybe it's worth a little bit less than an actual machasita shekel, and so you add a little more and go to the Bet HaMikdash just to make sure you gave the full amount. And yet another reason is, during this time of the year, because everybody wants to give a machasita shekel, that denomination actually increases in value. So if you come to the money changer with a different denomination, like a sela is 2 shekels. What the rabbis call a shekel is actually a machasita shekel. It's a little confusing, right? In the rabbinic times, you have to give a shekel to fulfill machasita shekel. A full double payment is called a sela. So let's say I come with a sela, so I want to give half, and they're going to give me back a shekel. So now they're going to give me back a coin whose denomination is actually worth more now, because that denomination is more sought after. So it's worth slightly more. So I make up the difference by giving a kalbon. So those are 3 different reasons why one would give a kalbon. We're going to see that there could be instances where you have to actually give 2 or even 3 kalbon payments, depending on the circumstances. Anyway, who pays it? Leviim Yisraelim v'gerim v'avadim meshuchradim. So a Levi Israel or a convert that's he's Jewish, or a slave that was freed is also Jewish. So all these people have to give machazita shekel, so they have to give the kalbon too. But kohanim, women and slaves and children, they all do not have to give machazita shekel. So therefore, if they do give it out of their own free will, we add a surcharge also to them, right? It's enough that they're giving it. Kohanim is interesting here because we saw a whole machloket about it, right? And Rabbi Yochanan, like I said, they really do need to give it. But in any case, we don't collect it. So when they do give it, we don't charge them the surcharge. Hashokel al yedei kohen al yedei isha, ha'isha al yed ebed al yad katan patur. If an adult male decides to give a machazita shekel on behalf of a kohen, or maybe his wife, or a slave or child, patur. Since they don't have to give themselves, if they were giving it, so too, if a man gives it for them, also no surcharge. However, if I decide to give a shekel for myself and for my friend David, and he'll pay me back after, then I do have to give a surcharge, even though it's for someone else. We're assuming that this is a loan. But Rabbi Meir Omer, Shene Kolbanot. Rabbi Meir says I have to pay 2 surcharges. Seems to be specifically in this case, because I have to give one and you have to give one. So even though I'm giving for you, we both have to give the surcharge. So it seems that Rabbi Meir would say the surcharge is not simply for the tip for the money changer, but also because you actually have to give the full value. So midoraita, we want to make sure to have the full value there. So we both need to give it. Hanoten sela v'notel shekel hayav shene kolbanot. It's not clear who says this statement. Is it Bimeir or a separate statement? The Gemara will discuss both ways. In any case, the point is here that if I give a sela, which is double payment, and then I get change, which is a shekel. Remember, a shekel is equivalent to half a shekel in Torah denomination. So I'm giving double, I'm getting back 1. Now I have to give 2 kolbanot. Why? Well, I'm paying for the money changer because now he has to exchange something. And also, I'm getting back a full shekel of value and giving the rest of it. So that would be 2. The Gemara is going to explain that this is according to everybody. Rav is going to explain that this is everyone's opinion. It might even require 3 in this case. Hashokel al yad ani v'al yad shecheno al yad ben be'iro patur v'im hilvan chayav. If I give on behalf of a poor person or a neighbor or someone who lives in a resident of the city, I do not have to give the surcharge because now I'm giving it as a gift to the person. and so no problem. But if I lend it to them, then I'm chayav. So that's the distinction between this case and the one before. If I'm giving it for my friend, that's just a loan. But if I'm giving it freely, I want to help out someone else, then we don't give a surcharge if you're, after all, giving charity and helping out. Ha'achin hashutafin shechayavin bekalbon is the last statement of the Mishnah. Very interesting. So you have brothers. We're talking about brothers who got an inheritance. Their father died, and so now they are partners. Do they have to give kalbon? Let's say they're in partnership, so they're giving, let's say, one whole or whatever, two, but from their money that they have in common. Shechayavin bekalbon peturim mimaser behema. There's an inverse relationship between their requirement to give maaser behema and giving the kalbon. Well, why would they not have to give a tenth of their animals? If you own animals and they have children during the year, I have to give a tenth of all the children that are born while I'm owning them. However, if I go to you and I purchase animals, I don't have to give maaser because I bought them, right? They were born when they were under your care. I bought them, and even though they were born that year, I don't have to give maaser. So the situation is like this: if I have brothers that they inherited, and they kept the inheritance together, that inheritance is like a corporate entity. It doesn't belong to either one of them. It belongs to the father, but the father is gone, so they control it. Because of that, they would not have to give. So they have it. Now let's say they split it up between the two, right? They said, this is my half, this is your half. Because of that, it's kind of like they're buying and selling each to the other, right? These are my animals, you take these, I take these. So in that case, they do not have to give maaser behema because they just acquired it for themselves from another entity. In that case, they would not have to give maaser behema, but they would have to give a kalbon, because they're giving from their own money. However, if they keep it together, the inheritance, as a corporate entity, then the corporation has to give maaser behema because these animals were born under the father's property. They're still the father's property, just the father's gone, so it's controlled by the brothers. So they would have to give a tenth, but they would not have to give a kalbon because the corporate entity is paying the amount on their behalf. And anytime I pay on behalf of someone else without intention to get repaid, if it's just a gift, you don't have to pay a surcharge. Okay, the Gemara will discuss this further, but this is a very interesting concept. Last thing, how much is a kalbon? Kamal kalbon ma'a kesef deber b'meir hachamim omerim chasi ma'a. So one says it's a ma'a, which is b'meir, and the other one says a half. That ends up being a 12th of the full payment of the machazit shekel, or a 24th, according to Chachamim. Okay, Gemara begins with the first topic. Afal pisha amiru halitboa en tob'in. Regarding a minor, we have a discrepancy between two clauses within the Mishnah. Because on the one hand, it says if they want to give, they can. Well, we can infer from that we do not collect. On the other hand, it also said we don't take collateral. Well, you don't take collateral, but we can infer from that you do collect. So which one is it? The answer is, as we said yesterday, depends if they grew two hairs, and before let's say around age 13, we do not collect from them at all. If they want to give, they can. And when we say that we don't collect we don't take their possessions, they're talking about still it's a minor in the sense of a child, but between 13 and 20. In that case, we do collect from them, but we will not take their property as collateral. Next, hanochri vehakuti. Amar Rabbi Ba, tipater keman de amar kuti kenochri. Ditpaligin kuti kenochri debre Rabbi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer kuti ki Yisrael lechol davar. This is a fascinating machloket, historical machloket. What is the status of the Samaritans? One says that they are like non-Jews, and Rashbag says that they are like Jews for all matters. It says actually ki Yisrael, not ki Yehudi, which is interesting. So what is the historical reality? Well, we should not call them Jews because Yehudi comes from Yehuda, meaning Judeans, and they are not from Judea. They are, in fact, remnants of the northern 10 tribes. When the northern 10 tribes were exiled, they weren't all exiled, just like 10, 20% of them. The rest stayed behind and got mixed up with other populations from Kuta. So to call them Kutim is actually a derogatory term. The rabbi is using a derogatory term. If you met a Samaritan, called him Kuti, he might be upset at you. So we're calling them all foreigners. In fact, they're probably 80% actually from the 10 tribes and 20% from other places. But the story in Sefer Melachim is that when they went there, some lions came and were devouring them. And they said, "Oh, it's because we're not following the Torah of the God of this place." And so they brought in a Kohen who taught them Torah. And now they follow Torah. So because they did that, is that considered that they all converted, even those who weren't ethnically Jewish, and therefore they're treated like Jews? Or do we say, no, it was a fake conversion and they really don't follow and we can treat them like non-Jews? I mean, the truth is that they're kind of in between. In different periods of history, sometimes they followed a lot of the laws and they had a good relationship with the rabbis. The rabbis say you can buy masah from them. And other rabbis say, no, they're totally different. And their relationship between the two sometimes was good and sometimes was at war. Okay, so we have this machloket, and so now we say it must be that our Mishnah is following the opinion that says that, like Rabbi, that says they are like non-Jews, because after all, the Mishnah said Kutim and non-Jews cannot bring machasita shekel, cannot bring any of the korbanot that are obligatory, so treating them like non-Jews. Okay, so that seems to make sense. Amar Rabbi Le'azar, this is a Yerushalmi word. His name is actually El-Azar, but in the dialect in Israel, they sometimes did not pronounce the aleph at the beginning of words, which is amazing that the Yerushalmi still continues to print it as in the way that it was originally spoken, the spoken Hebrew in Eretz Yisrael, like kind of like in Yiddish, they say laser, right, which is short for El-Azar. Okay, anyway, his name, Amar Rabbi El-Azar, Matnitin benochrim, ha bekutim lo. He explains that, in fact, the Mishnah, we should split the difference because that the Mishnah is actually talking about non-Jews, but not talking about kutim. In other words, when you read the rest of the Mishnah that says that they cannot bring anything, they cannot bring different matters, it's only excluding the non-Jews, but not the kutim. As I summarized here, according to the Elazar, Samaritans may not give the chasi shekel, but they can give sacrifices. So only the first line that says machasita shekel, no one can, non-Jews and Samaritans cannot get machasita shekel. But when it continues, the next line, and no sacrifices, that's only talking about non-Jews, but Samaritans could give sacrifices, obligatory sacrifices, which might suggest the opposite opinion that they are actually like Jews. Maybe they still can't give the machasita shekel because of the pasuk in Ezra, as we said before. That's Rabbi Elazar's opinion. V'taneh ken. Adam lerabot et hagerim, mikem leosi et hamumarim. After all, in Vayikra was introducing the offerings. It says the word Adam, right? A person, if he brings an animal, this includes converts, and then the Samaritans could be included in converts. Mikem leosi et hamumarim, but a Jew who's an apostate, a Jew who rejected Judaism, cannot bring a korban, right? So that's interesting. So that would accord with Rabbi Elazar. However, we have a source that contradicts Rabbi Elazar. Matnitin peligi al Rabbi Elazar. Our Mishnah, right, does not really fit with that because it says en mekabalim miyadam kineh zavin vezavot v'kineh yoledot v'chi kineh zavin vezavot benochrim. The continuation where it talks about sacrifices is about the sacrifices of Azav and Zavah. What does that apply to non-Jews at all? What non-Jew would ever want to bring korban for Azav? They don't even know what it is. So it doesn't make sense to say that the part about sacrifices is only talking about non-Jews, but not Samaritans. Ela resha benochrim v'safa bikutim kenhu resha benochrim v'safa bikutim. Rather, we have to say that the first part is talking about nochrim and Samaritans. It doesn't say it, but then the Sefer is talking about specifically Kutim, the part about the sacrifices. In fact, non-Jews can't bring them either, but non-Jews wouldn't even want to bring them. So we're talking about Samaritans who might want to bring them and they may not. And so that we say the Mishnah is rejecting Rabbi Elazar. Okay, now we have an interesting machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish. We'll see a challenge to Rabbi Yochanan and a challenge to Resh Lakish, then a challenge to both and a further challenge to Resh Lakish. Let's see what their machloket is. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, בתחילה אין מקבלין מהן לא דבר מסוים ולא דבר שאינו מסוים. ובסוף מקבלין מהם דבר שאינו מסוים ואין מקבלין מהם דבר מסוים. So it says at the beginning, when they were building the Bet HaMikdash, the policy was that they would not accept from Samaritans anything at all, not a specific item and not an unspecific donation. A specific donation would be like if they donated a handle, a doorknob, a decoration, a sconce, something to put on the roof to keep the birds away. Anything specific, we would not accept, and anything non-specific, just money. No, we don't accept anything from the Samaritans. They cannot help us rebuild the Bet HaMikdash. And Basof, however, after it's already built, and just if you want to do upkeep, in that case, we accept things that are not specific, but not something that is specific. The point is, we don't want to have put up an artwork or a sconce, and the Samaritan will come and say, I donated that. We don't want to give them that honor. But if they just want to give us a monetary value of something, and it'll go into the general treasury, that's okay, because they can't point to it. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Resh Lakish is more machmir. Amar ben betechila ben basof en mekabelin mehen lo davar mesuyam velo davar she'eno mesuyam. No, not when they're building, and not ever after. We do not accept anything, not an specific item, and not a monetary value. Okay, so that's the machloket between them. It has it says mehen, which seems to refer to Samaritans. In the ensuing discussion, we're going to include discussion of non-Jews also. Okay, matnita. I guess the assumption is that we treat Samaritans like non-Jews. Matnita peligi al Rabbi Yochanan. We have a braita that is a challenge to Rabbi Yochanan. The braita says, "En mekabelin mehen hekdesh undavar lebedek habayit." So here it says you cannot accept from non-Jews or Samaritans something that is designated as hekdesh or a present, even if it will just be for the maintenance of the house. Now, something that's just given for the maintenance of the house is a non-specific item. And yet he says we don't accept it. But the Baraita says you don't accept it. But Rabbi Yochanan says you should accept a non-specific item after it's built for maintenance. So this is a question. Patala ben batechila ben basof bilbad davar mesuyam. You know what? We can explain that, limit this Baraita that is talking about whether at the beginning or at the end, and it's talking about a davar mesuyam, that when he says, I want to donate this particular item, this vase, I'm going to donate it to the Bet HaMikdash, and that's why we don't accept it, right? But in fact, if it was just a monetary value, we would accept it. Okay, so he answered his problem. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, ben betechila ben basof en mekabelin mehen lo davar mesuyam. Just repeat what Resh Lakish says. You don't accept anything ever. Matnita peligal Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. We have a braita that contradicts him. Tetane kol shavin shehen nodrin v'nidarin. Everyone agrees that non-Jews or Samaritans can give vows, and they can be the subject of a vow. Now, vow, they'd be assuming this means now that let's say I donate my value, right? So then we can give that. Or if someone says, I'm going to donate the value of that non-Jew. So either way, it's valid. And so here you see he's donating a non-specific amount, and yet it's not permitted. Sorry, it's permitted, right? This says that they are allowed to donate a non-specific amount. It's a specific amount. He's donating his worth, but it's to a non-specific purpose, and it's permitted. Resh Lakish is not permitted. What are you going to do with that? Answer, patar la olah. Must be when it says hen nodrin, they can give an olah sacrifice, which everyone agrees is permitted, right? They can't upkeep the Bet HaMikdash, but if they want to give a sacrifice to the God of Israel, everyone agrees that that's permitted. So that's nodrin. Nicha nodrin olah, nidarin olah. But okay, that's fine. That's good for the active verb. But the one that says they can be donated, what does that mean, right? Is a non-Jew going to donate a non-Jew? It says here, right? Sacrifice him. We don't want to start any blood libels here, right? That doesn't make any sense. How can we understand that word? Ella כשאמר ישראל הרי עליי עולה, ושמע נוכלי ואמר מה שאמר זה עליי. Rather, it could be talking about when there's a Jew that says, I'm going to donate a burnt offering. A non-Jew hears that and says, me too. right? I also take that upon myself. So in that sense, he is passive, right? He is accepting the vow of someone else that he's also going to give, but it's not talking about monetary value, not for the upkeep of Bet HaMikdash, but rather an actual sacrifice. So Rabbi Resh Lakish solved his problem. Okay, Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan are still going to have to solve the next challenge. When someone brings an olah sacrifice, they also have to bring wine for the wine libation. Now, what happens when you bring the wine libation? Some of it goes on the altar, but the extra of it that goes for the general sacred vessels, and use it whenever you need to use it. And so in that case, if they're bringing a wine libation, which they need to, and they are allowed to, then that's going to end up some of it going to the upkeep. So how could they agree to that? Especially Resh Lakish, right? Really, Resh Lakish would have the problem with this. They're bringing a certain item. Okay, according to this line, even Rabbi Yochanan would have a problem with it, right? They're bringing an actual item, this particular wine that will be used for something. Okay, Hetiv Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Bon. So here is a response. Right, we have a source that says that non-Jews can value and be valuated. In other words, they can offer their value, or someone else can offer their value. So isn't that for Beda Kabayit? Isn't that for upkeep? And yet it's allowed? So how do we answer that? However we answer that, we'll also answer the first question. Just like you say over there. L'shamayim hu mitkaven. Omer lehen hen ba'in lebedek habayit. Kenet amar apacha. L'shamayim hu mitkaven. Omer lehen hen ba'in lebedek habayit. In both of these cases, when the non-Jew offers it, he thinks he's offering something to Shamayim, right, to heaven, and it'll be used, it'll go to heaven. He wants to give a present to the God of Israel, so we allow him. As long as he doesn't think or have intention that he's giving to upkeep the Bet HaMikdash. So if he comes and says, I write a check, I wanna do repairs, I want to repaint the Bet HaMikdash, we don't allow him, right? Because this is our house, we take care of it, we don't want anybody's help. But they are allowed to make an offering to the God of Israel. And so that for sure an animal is allowed. Now, if they happen to give something that they think is an offering to the God of Israel, even though once we process it, all or part of it will end up going to the upkeep, that's permitted, because their intention is not to give to the upkeep of the Bet HaMikdash. Okay, good. Now, just last point to Resh Lakish. Ma'avad la Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish patar la lo lachem velanu libnot bayit le'elokenu. So how is Resh Lakish going to explain his opinion that you can't give anything, not at the beginning, not for the upkeep, not for the building, and not for the upkeep? Well, he can learn it from here, because when the first generation of the Persians confront the Samaritans, they say, not for you and us is to build the house of Hashem, and therefore, right, they won't accept anything at all. And we add yet another pasuk. Rabbi Chizkiah Amar Rabbi Simon Sha'al Me'ata en mekabelin mehen la'matamayim ulchomot ha'ir migdoleha al shem shenemar velachem en chelek. He now extends, if you say that this pasuk means you can't ever donate anything, not only to the building, but even to the upkeep, which is future keeping the building going. Well, then that would mean that we cannot offer donations from non-Jews for anything in the entire city of Yerushalayim, because in the pasuk in Nehemiah, this is when they're rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and doing other things to benefit the city. He says his servants will arise, but you will have no portion nor right in the memorial of Jerusalem. So it's not only the Bet HaMikdash, but the whole Yerushalayim has to be so. Okay, this is all very interesting, because when Cyrus gives them permission to rebuild the Bet HaMikdash, he does say that he will help them donate, and he will return the vessels that Nebuchadnezzar stole. He's going to return it to them. Maybe that's permitted because they were stolen in the first place. He's just returning stolen goods, but not sure what they did if he wanted to give other things. Okay, matnita de Rabbi Meir. Damar Rabbi Meir kishem sheklo Torah Koblanot Torah. Okay, our Mishnah here is the opinion of the Rabbi Meir. It says, because Rabbi Meir says, just like machasita shekel is required midoraita, so too the surcharge is required midoraita. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Kasabar Rabbi Meir benoten shiklo shalem shehu chayav bekalbon. And so it's talking about a case where he gave a full amount, and still, nevertheless, he gave a whole shekel, half for himself and half for someone else, and that's why he has to give double. So when the Mishnah said that if I give for someone else, right, we said it's talking about a loan. Nevertheless, I have to give, even though actually the money changer doesn't have to do anything. I'm giving him, right, a double half shekel, right? I'm giving him a double payment for two people. So he doesn't have to actually change anything. So therefore, it shouldn't be a tip for the money changer. And nevertheless, I have to give. So this would make sense according to the Rabbi Meir, who says it's a Torah law. And it makes sense if it's a Torah, to say it's a Torah law, if you say I have to ensure to give the full amount that the Torah says. So I'm adding a surcharge just in case it's debased. דאמר רבי מאיר, כמין מטבע של אש הוציא הקדוש ברוך הוא מתחת כיסא כבודו וראהו למשה, ואמר לו, זה ייתנו, כזה ייתנו. The word זה, anytime it appears in the Torah, there's a whole midrashic tradition that זה means pointing to something, an actual object. So Rabbi Meir said that when Hashem told Moshe, זה ייתנו, you should tell Bnei Yisrael to give this, it means God took out a coin from under his throne and said, I want you to give something like this. Therefore, whenever we give machasita shekel, it can't just be whatever you call a shekel in your day. It has to be equal, at least in value, at least to that ideal machasita shekel that was originally shown. And that's why you have to add a surcharge just in case ours is a bit less. That's what Meir. Now, Natan said, "Litol shekel chayav shte kolbanot." The Mishnah mentioned that if I give one, right, and I get change, if I give a double payment and then I get change, I have to give two surcharges. Whose opinion was that? Amar Rabbi Elazar de Rabbi Meir he detanya elu chayvin bekalbon v'chole kalbon echad. Rabbi Meir amar shete kolbanot. So if you say you have to give two surcharges for the same item, that makes sense according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Ve'amar Rav. Okay, so that in that case, when you're giving something and getting change, you have to give two. That's Rabbi Meir. Everybody else would say just one in that case. However, against Rabbi Elazar's opinion, V'amar Rav divrei hakolhi, the opinion that says I have to give double when I get change, I have to give two kolbanot. That's actually the majority opinion, and because I have on the one hand I have to give a tip because I'm getting change. On the other hand, I have to give the kalbon because it might be worth less. דאמר רבי מאיר, אחד שקל שהוא נותן, ואחד שקל שהוא נוטל, ואחד לדברי תורה. In that case where I give and get change, I actually have to give three surcharges according to Rabbi Meir, because he's going to follow all the different opinions, all the different reasons. One is I have to give the money changer, he's helping me out, so I have to give him something. And also because I have to make sure to give the full amount, that's the Doraita part of it. And also because he's giving me back a machasita shekel, or a shekel in rabbinic terms, and that denomination is worth more now than during the rest of the year. So I have to pay a surcharge for that. So I actually have to pay all three, would have to pay all three according to the Rabbi Meir. And there would therefore be three. The opinion of the Mishnah is actually the other, the majority opinion would say only two in that case. Rabbi Shmuel bar Yaakov, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak b'shem Rav, שלושה קורבנות עינון, אחד שקל שהוא נותן, ואחד שקל שהוא נוטל, ואחד לדבר Torah. And so this is in the name of Rav, explaining what we just said further. In the case where I give a full selah and get back a shekel, I have to give three surcharges, one for what I'm giving, because it might not be one for what I'm giving, because it's, well, let's see, one for what I'm taking, that would be because one for what I'm giving, that's the surcharge, to the tip for the money changer. One for what I'm getting, because now that machazit, that shekel is worth more, that denomination is worth more. And one for Torah, that would go to the Bet HaMikdash itself to fill in case it was debased. All right, and finally, last law of the Mishnah, Achim ve'ashutafin שחייבים בקלבון ופטורים ממעשר בהמה, ושחלקו וחזרו ונשתתפו. Okay, Mishnah talked about two different cases where brothers would have to give or not give the kalbon. So what's each case? So brothers and partners, brothers who are partners, they have to give a kalbon, they have surcharge, and they don't give maaser behema. That's when they inherit, their father died, they inherited something together, and they split it. When they split it, so now I'm saying, here's your animals, here's my animals, so we're exchanging animals. In that case, I just received the animals, and so whatever was born was not born under my care, so I don't have to give maaser. But then we made a partnership together. Now the partnership we made together, now here we have joint money. So that joint money is actually mine and yours, and we're giving the machasita shekel from our money, so we have to give the kalbon. That's the case where you have to give the surcharge, but not maaser. שחייבים במעשר ופטורים במעשר בהמה ופטורים מן הקלבון ושלא חלקו. And the case where they have to give maaser but not the kalbon, that's when they left the estate as it is, and they so now it's its own corporate identity because the animals were born within that corporate identity. That corporation has to give maaser behema. But since that corporation is paying on my behalf and I'm not paying myself, no surcharge when someone else pays on your behalf. Good. אמר רבי אלעזר, והן שחלקו גדיים כנגד תיישים ותיישים כנגד גדיים. Rabbi Elazar adds a leniency. Says you would only have to pay the maaser behema when we split it, that you take the goats, I'll take the kids, right? And so in that case, where really we inherited everything together. So we inherited both the goats and the kids. If I'm splitting it, so it's okay, you take all the goats, I'm basically selling to you or giving you. In that case, it's actually splitting it up. And in that case, you would not have to give the maaser behema. אבל אם חלקו גדיים כנגד גאים תיישים כנגד תיישים, הוא חלקו משעה הראשונה. But if we at first split it and said, I'll take half the animals, whatever, and you take half the animals, whatever, and then we put them together, well, then you never really split them apart. And because you never really split them apart, it still remains a corporation. In that case, you have to give maaser. So actually, it's a stringency that he's saying. Okay, so he's adding a stringency. אמר רבי יוחנן, אפילו חלקו גדיים נגד גדיים ותיישים נגד תיישים כלקוחות הן ובתורים מן המעשר. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, don't add that stringency, you don't need that. Even if we split, I get all you get some kids, you get some goats, I get some goats, that's considered that, we split it and we separated and I bought them and I sold them, you sold to you the other ones, we exchanged them, and therefore it's a new entity and I don't have to give maaser. Anytime you give or you buy or give as a present, and this would be like that, you don't have to give maaser behema. So Rabbi Yochanan reads it in a straightforward way. Rabbi Elazar actually is both a stringency and a leniency. The stringency because you have to give maaser, but it would be a leniency in that you would not have to give the kalbon. I imagine that kalbon surcharge is considered as worth much less than the tenth of animals that they would have to give that were born. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.